Meeting of the East Lampeter Township Emergency Service Committee to order at 8 o'clock. You need to play.
Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the Township's YouTube channel. Please continue to check the Township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the Township's website. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Okay, at this time, I would ask that everyone rise and we will pledge allegiance to our flag. Okay, thank you. Let me start with the people on Zoom. Don Boyer, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Melanie, is that Melanie? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. I guess those are the only two that we have. We need to go around the room and introduce everyone. Okay. Let's start at the right and we'll move to the left. Okay. So.
I'll Hutchison, I'm the township manager.
Tara Hitchens, Assistant Township Manager.
Steve Gribble, rep from Rungs Fire Company.
Jim Martin. Burden Hand.
Eric Bergstrom, Citizen Rep Lafayette.
Dave Keenes, Fire Chief Lafayette.
Greg Sherman, Fire Chief Whitmer.
Paul Fisher, Vice President, and
Dave Buckwaller, Township Supervisor.
Introduce any guests? This time, all right. We do have a quorum. So we'll move on to non-voting attendees and public attendees. Two more. Okay, very good. Thank you. Previous minutes, are there any corrections or approvals or questions? Previous minutes, Dave, you did a fantastic job of putting those minutes together. It was a lot of hard work.
Thank you. I can't tell you how many times I watched the YouTube. It came in very handy.
Okay, very good. Are there any corrections or changes that need to be made? If not, then I would call for approval of the previous minutes. Okay, Eric? So moved.
Dave Keenes, second.
All right. Okay, we'll move to old business, please. Report of the Fire Apparatus Replacement Committee. Burden Hand.
there hasn't been any planning status. We're still aiming for 2024 at this point. So
Okay. Emergency operations plan. He is not here, is he?
No, but I can report to you that
Sure.
the staff's been busy with other things, unfortunately, so we haven't made a whole lot of progress with the plan yet. I'm hoping that we can do that once the budget season is over. So
Okay.
hopefully early next year.
Okay, very good. Then we have continued old business discussion of the chief's meeting continued. I would like to suggest that we move to the new business and the public comments. We'll hold to after we've discussed, and then we'll go back to the discussion, because I think that discussion is probably going to take a little bit longer. Is there any objection to us moving to the new business first and then moving back to that discussion? I think that's going to be interesting. Discussion. Okay. All right. So if we can go to the new business, the review of the 2022 planned capital expenditures, please.
We received communication from 3 of the 4 fire companies about what was planned for next year. We made copies of those for the committee members. And the only thing we didn't receive was any information from Whitmer.
As always, we haven't decided anything yet. Ours is over at the end of the year.
Okay. Shall we poll the fire companies then, please? We'll start with Bird in Hand.
I don't think I really have anything, Jim. I think they reported this time.
Okay. We'll move to Ross. Steve?
The only thing we had going on right now is just to let you know, we did purchase some more DeWalt equipment. Some of that was placed on our squad and some was placed on our engine. Since we switched over to a lot of the battery tools, we're trying to, again, make ourselves more efficient depending on the amount of manpower you have from time to time. And with that equipment, it definitely can put things in operation a lot quicker. So again, we added some saws, some more lighting that's portable. And again, it's a lot safer too, and not having to take cords out across, roadways and stuff like that. So that is something we did add. The other thing I'd like to bring up right now, and whether you want to call it, you're pulling the companies, is right now the alternates that we have in the room here. We have I believe we still have a president at Whitmer. We're going to have, Dave is going to be the president at Runks, and Jason Byler's back there, the president of Lafayette. We used to have them involved, and I know it's tough to do this on Zoom, but when we used to have our meetings, I'm going to call it the normal meetings, that they were at the same table and they were able to input things. Donnie Boyer is on Zoom, and so each company pretty much has a executive person and a fire person here. And we understand, and we've always done this, that each fire company has one vote, not a problem. But we have a lot of ideas that when they're sitting out there, it's kind of tough for them to, have input with this. And, before, it didn't matter if you were an alternate or you were a delegate, everyone could voice their opinion and talk. And right now they're kind of like separated out there. And my concern is, there's knowledge there. The input should be taken, and not just the people that are sitting at this table at the front. Is there a way we can? Go ahead, Dave.
I always thought the intention of the separation was that these are the voting members, but yes, they should participate, in my opinion.
Well, and I realize if they want to say something, and it's tough on Zoom anyway sometimes to hear everything, but is there a way we can come up with this? But because for, you know, when we first started this the whole way through, it was everyone's input. And yeah, we're the ones that can vote, but you know, I'm just trying to come up with a way. I thought about this the other night and I talked to a few of the people and, you know, their opinions are just as valuable as the ones that are up front here. And, you know, when it comes to the input on some of the things we want to talk about, you know, there's a lot of experience in out here too. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it on Zoom. It's a little different compared to the meetings we used to have. So
Well, we do have a public comment.
they're not public. They are not the public. They are still representatives of the fire
Yeah,
companies.
But that's what has been always used for anyone other than.
No, you are wrong on that. When we had meetings at our fire hall up here at the township building, we had, everyone sat around and was able to say, if you were not a rep or an alternate, yes, that's when we used to bring in and say, okay, you know, anyone have any opinions? But that is not how this was supposed to be. The voting is right here.
No, I don't know. I picked up what was done in the previous couple
And that was,
years. but
and
here,
we
but,
had changed that around so many times.
I don't have any problem with anyone having any input. I guess we need to figure out how to.
Yeah, the technology definitely is a limiting factor to try and get everybody in the Zoom call so that people who are joining by Zoom have an image that they can watch and understand what's going on. We have some limitations on how many of these microphones that we have. We do have, you know, a handheld. We've probably got another handheld that we could pass around. You know, for purposes of Zoom and the limitations of technology. Also, I always thought for the person taking minutes to be able to distinguish between who's voting and who's not, because that was always a muddled mess, in my opinion.
I
in the
won't
past.
disagree with that, but you know,
So-
I believe when, you know, if something comes up and we're talking with the fire side of it, okay. Paul he's an executive officer where the chief is sitting on Zoom and, you know, he should be able, you know, to voice his opinion on when it comes time, if it's a fire.
Well, how about if anyone, I don't know how we're going to do it with Don or tonight, but anyone out here that may have a comment, raise their hand and I'll recognize them. I mean, all of that's.
They can do that on Zoom as well.
And-
There's
Right.
a function. to-
And.
But I just, you know,
That's, I mean.
we
I
haven't
think
done
that's
it.
the easiest way.
We
to
haven't
do
done it
We'll
since
just-
we
yeah,
started the Zoom thing, but
yeah.
when you have some of the presidents out here too, as far as the executive side, you know, I think, you know,
Anyone
There's-
have any objection
Well,
to
there
that?
are a couple of thoughts. First of all, you're right, that there's a lot of wisdom in people that are here or people that are in Zoom. You know, a lot of organizations allow that, but then they limit the amount of airtime a person takes to give their point down to 2, 3, 4 minutes, whatever the case may be. Otherwise, you have a 3 or 4 hour meeting, and then people stop showing up because it's a 3, 4 hour meeting. The other issue that can be is what if there's a difference of opinion between the executive officer and the chief?
there can be,
But can I?
because
finish my comment?
we all have different
Can I
opinions
finish my
anyway.
comment?
Go ahead.
That I would think you'd want to have ironed out before you come into the meeting, so that at least, or even a situation where you say, we have a difference of opinion. There's these two, and then just put it that way. But I think your point is, your original point is right on the money, that there's wisdom in the room and that should be heard. But you have to have some limitations, or else you're gonna have a meeting that just will never stop. That's my thoughts.
Well, I think it's my responsibility to stop discussion discussion. What people are trying to. So, yeah. For tonight, any of you folks out here, raise your hand and I'll hear you. And go ahead, Dave.
Thank you.
Something to do. We understand it's one vote. I don't think it's anybody should be the alternates. If we're having a discussion about the chief's things. I've experienced that was the chief. I think it should be.
All right.
And it's tough because we're separated. Last meeting, I'm trying to text that.
Okay.
This
Go
is
ahead.
your meeting, so, you know,
I mean,
however the committee wants to
I,
operate, you know.
Go ahead, Tim. Yeah. Yeah.
Tim, the people in Zoom probably can't hear you. You may want to use the mic. That's what we do in our meetings. I think it's best that
Yeah.
everybody gets recorded.
Just
that
come
way.
to the mic, yeah.
I just want to point out that up until COVID, it was a round table, so to speak. And that's what Steve's point is,
Yeah.
that the people that were appointed by the supervisors were on that, around that table. So I think what Hutch is saying is the limitations today is the technology right here. Maybe there can be some things worked on. Maybe you can pull more chairs up. I'm not even sure how many total people are on the committee, if you count the alternates and the regulars. Remember?
Well, maybe we can separate, maybe we can make it simple. All the alternates sit on this side of the room, all the guests sit on that side of the room. And then I'll recognize the alternates and I won't recognize them until the guests until we ask for public opinion. How's that? And then that'll end it. We okay with that? All right. Okay. All right. So alternates, please sit over here. Thanks for the administration. Everett here, Steve. Anything else? Okay.
No.
All right. So then we'll move on to Lafayette. Dave?
The extra give is tomorrow. We'll be starting at 5 a.m. That's all I have to report at this time, except for the new duty officer vehicle is going to be delayed maybe till early next year.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, Whitmer.
Pretty much, like I said, I had just sure that hospital time for returns. Just what we did here in the last meeting, start pursuing, see what our options are for.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Emergency Services is not here tonight. Hutch, you're on next.
Thank you. I did distribute new gas cards to the 3 fire companies that use the gas card system. So wanted to make note of that. Just ask you to destroy the old ones. So thank you. If there are any updates to drivers lists of that sort, please let us know so we can keep that current. Appreciate all the reports that come in, spill control reports and the like. So if there are any out there that haven't, please get those in. We appreciate that work and the information that we get from those. As everybody might know, the 2 bridge projects that were underway, county bridges, South Bronx over the Peckway and on Whitmer Road over Mill Creek are now done. So those bridges are back open. I was asked at the last meeting to communicate with our township employees about the township's position on being volunteers with the fire companies, any one of the fire companies. I did that, communicated to them that if they are volunteering with a fire company and there's a call during the day when they're working, as long as they're not leaving a situation that creates a safety problem for us, they're free to go and respond to those calls. But it's up to them as to whether or not they choose to volunteer. So, but I did communicate that with them. I guess the other thing I would just note, and I don't know if it's going to come up in some other conversation, at least for the citizens as part of this, neighboring township, Paradise, is going through a consolidation. One of their fire companies is being, closed is not the right term, I don't think, but not going to be responding to calls. So I don't know, honestly, how much of an impact that'll have on East Lampeter, but it could. That's all that I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Terry, anything that you wanted to add? Okay, okay. Dave?
No,
You have nothing? Okay. All right. Then at this time, I would like to return, unless there's other new business, or any other new business. Melanie, I'm sorry, do you have any input? At this time?
No, I was just going to ask Hutch, what fire company is that?
Paradise.
Oh, Paradise is, okay. Thank you.
Eric?
But this way, on that,
Go ahead.
the vote has not been taken yet because they canceled that on Tuesday night from what we were told. But I'm not sure how, there's so many rumors going around, flying around. That's the worst thing right now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, if we now can return to old business, and I would like to open the discussion. I know Dave has put together some information that he wants to share, and I think Eric, you were going to share some information with us. You don't have anything. Okay, so I'd like to start with the discussion of what we had from the last several meetings. So I put together a straw man as a kind of a framework to start the discussion. And what I was hoping to do with this straw man was try to focus on those things that were or seemed to be important from what I gathered from what the chief's questions and observations were. So if I may read my proposal, my straw man proposal here, I'll do that. In the July and September 21 meetings, the ESC discussed the June 24th, 21 East Lampeter Township Chief's letter titled Questions, Observations Regarding Fire Service Study Notice of Intent. Discussions included several members requesting clarification of the letter's intent and the direction the chiefs were asking the committee to pursue. It appears that the intent of the letter is not to request a study of financial needs. Rather, it was explained that the chiefs are requesting guidance and assistance from the committee in addressing how to dramatically improve community support and involvement in staffing, administrative assistance, public education, and finances to support long-term sustainment of the township's volunteer services without adding significant burden onto the fire company or the township. At the September meeting, each member was asked to provide input on how to assist with improving the 4 fire company capabilities to continue uninhibited volunteer support services to the community. The majority of comments supported a bottom-up approach to help identify possible short and long-term solutions. As a result, it was suggested that the ESC chairman develop a prioritized list of issues presented by the chiefs as a starting point for discussion by the ESC. Many members were asked to think about possible approaches and bring these ideas to future meetings. As a result of these discussions, the following outline was developed to help frame committee discussions with the development of a proposed series of actions leading to the improvement and sustainment of the East Lampeter Township Volunteer Fire Service. Critical to the success of any result or a resulting proposal is that each fire company must be willing to be critically and honestly evaluate in standing with their community they serve, as well as their own administrative, financial, and tactical needs. So my proposed straw man is as follows. I think top priority is to understand the community needs and its perception of the fire company. We need to have full support and cooperation from all segments of the fire company planning for coordinating a community outreach. Need to engage with the business leaders to define your capabilities and operational concerns for supporting their activities. And engage with community leaders and key citizens. Ask for critical input to help in the development of community support. How does a customer perceive your operation? What changes do they propose that may assist with your long-term sustainment? Develop a list of requirements critical to volunteer recruitment and sustainment. Be honest and forthright with problem areas. Evaluate ways to encourage and recruit and retention of volunteers and administrative help. There are school programs, other community agencies and organizations, both governmental and non-governmental. Engagement includes meeting with key company and community leaders, defining critical needs, as well as developing trust in what you are trying to accomplish. The community is your customer, and they are the only providers of the critical assets, both personnel and financial support. So their perception and participation in developing a successful sustainment program the second priority, I think, is developing a financial review, both short and long term. There, with the Ways and Means Committee, identifying long-reaching goals, Finance and Audit Committee to develop financial oversight, implement suggested improvements and approaches that will foster the financial growth and sustainment of the fire company. And then an administrative review for bylaws, policies, mission statements, and so forth that are critical to the normal operation. Implementing changes that will aid in improvement of the administration and operational activities based on all the above. This is not an all-encompassing list. Every member of ESC's input is critical for the further development of a viable and workable proposal that supports the mission of the East Lampeter Township Emergency Services Committee, and most important, the township fire companies. I think over the next several meetings, committee members will be asked to discuss and develop an approach to aid in the sustainment of the East Lampeter Township Volunteer Fire Service. Just a starting point. I know that a lot of the fire companies already are doing pieces and parts of this. And there's no intent in what I've written here to be critical of anyone or anything that is going on in individual fire companies. It's just an attempt to put a straw man together to help chiefs' concerns and questions and observations that they last time expressed. We need input. If I remember right, what was said was, we, the chiefs, fire companies, need input from this committee and the citizens of this committee to help with the long-term sustainment of the volunteer forces in the township. So with that, that's the priority list that I've developed as a starting point. And I'm open to discussing anything that I've written, but I think what I'd like to do first is let Dave present your PowerPoint that you put together. Because I think there were a lot of things that you said in there that are pretty close to what I've developed. And you had some other thoughts as well. Okay? So if you don't mind, with your PowerPoint.
I can talk to it. I don't know if we'll have that up on the monitor or not because the audience does not have the PowerPoint. So let me start off saying that back in, I'm going to guess it was the April timeframe in Emergency Service Committee, we went through a meeting and we had several meetings where we had lack of participation from the members that were on this committee. And the concern was raised about that. John Blowers, Township Supervisor, at the end of that meeting said, he made a statement that said, guys, if there's anything that you need, let us know. Don't wait till it's too late. That kind of resonated with me. At the Chiefs meeting that we had in July, we started brainstorming some ideas to bring back to this committee. We talked about how the meetings were being run, how we just basically come and we do 30-minute short report out. Sometimes the meetings were an hour, but we didn't really get into the meat and potatoes, I'll call it, of the fire service. We didn't talk about our bad spots. So we jotted down some of those points, things that we'd like to talk about. There's some things that even being a fire chief at Lafayette and being a member there for nearly 20 years now, there are things that I don't understand about this town that I need to learn. And that's kind of where I started off with my PowerPoint, is trying to understand the township and growth, where we see growth and where it's projected. I'm gonna have to pull out my notes now. So there was a article in the paper not too long ago. If you could back up one slide, please. There was an article in the paper not too long ago that showed projected growth in the county, and I termed that as where. When we look at the fastest growing municipalities in the county, Manheim Township surely tops it with being very close to Lancaster City at some 50,000 residents. I think Manheim Township's about 45,000 and Lancaster City is around 55,000. Then we have East and West Hempfield, the next largest growing, fastest growing township. And then as you can see, as we move up to the northern end and out into the larger township, I think it would be Peckway area. You can see that the growth is also occurring there to our southeast, I'm going to call it. So where's East Lampeter Township in all this? You know, that is my question. When I look at this slide, East Lampeter Township is the white spot that's in the middle of a circle to me. And I'm not sure what projected growth is. I know that we're going to build the biggest undertaking that we have to date out at the end of Greenfield Road. We have hotels that are planned across the street from Tanger. We have obviously restaurants, a car wash going in. We have projected planning going on at Oakview Road across from the police barracks. You know, there's stuff popping up all the time. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Trying to figure out where growth is going to occur in the township and what we need as far as fire service. It's hard to project out five to 10 years. I mean, things change so fast, but we're challenged with doing the best job that we can. So I've always told myself that at some point or the other, we're going to need more fire service funding, and things are going to have to change along with the growing community. It's no different than the police department or the public works. I mean, we have to add people to both of those. In 2016, with the police budget compared to today, we're another $1 million added to that. I'm sure the public works has gone up too. Everything's going up. Sewer, you know, we put in new water lines as far as hydrants in the area. Everything, the cost goes up, infrastructure changes. So as infrastructure changes, we need to adapt too. So here's the part I don't understand. So when we look at the township and we look at the township east and south, we have agricultural districts. And when we look at the west and the north, we're looking at business parks, residential, commercial, that kind of thing. So when I think about the ag district, and this is where I need help understanding, is the ag district, is that stay ag district from now and forever? I mean, are we not going to see any growth in the Bronx, Bird in Hand area? I think in the zoning document itself for the township, Bird in Hand is actually called out as being a special conditioned entity as far as growth goes. But can someone come along and decide to sell their farm and make it residential? But there is a process to go through, so that means it doesn't stay ag forever. Up to the Board of Supervisors, okay.
And you're correct, Bird in Hand is called out as a village district, which does have a different zoning than the agricultural has, obviously. It is village, just like Whitmer is, just like Soudersburg is, just like Smoketown is.
So if someone wants to come and put a restaurant in Bird in Hand, probably not going to be allowed unless the supervisors say so, right?
No, actually, if you follow the design guidelines of the zoning ordinance, it's a permitted use. If you don't follow the design guidelines, then you go before the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
Another question that goes along with that is you see a lot of farms that have then side cottage industries, shed manufacturing, whatever. So it's not just ag, it's ag/industrial. How's that play into what we're talking about? Because that changes things too. Especially from a fire protection standpoint.
Yes, there are ag support businesses that are allowed to be on farms.
So that complicates it a little bit too.
Tara, I think we actually have several pretty large commercial buildings on the table right now. And our fire department just received some of the blueprints for them right complex here as an example. Right now, and I understand there's going to be probably significant commercial buildings going in there relatively shortly. So Bird in Hand depends even what part of Bird in Hand. Like it's not all Bird in Hand district, I don't believe. I think there's certain areas that are, and others commercial or residential or whatever.
That's correct. That's actually zoned industrial there. And you're right, there's slated to be additional industrial buildings on that property. So infill can happen in any of the districts, even as Eric pointed out, in the agricultural district with the cottage industries.
So ag plans can change as long as they have Board of Supervisors approve it.
There are provisions in the zoning ordinance that permit on farm business.
And just a side question, do we know how much is in the protected ag zone? Do we have anything in protected?
We do have preserved farms. I don't know off the top of my mind.
Yeah, how many, I couldn't say right offhand, but land use and growth are very complicated things. If you want us to do, a presentation about that, we'd be happy to, but there's a thing called the urban growth area, which includes a portion of the township and excludes a portion. And the idea is that those are areas that are to be developed because there are utilities, roads, and other infrastructure where it makes sense to have growth to take advantage of that infrastructure. And on the other side, a desire to preserve farms and farmers as an important part of the community.
So then I guess a question I would have that is how far out is, if there is, any projected planning growth by the township? I think you do have is it out 5 years? Is it out 10 years?
Well, the county just did a comprehensive plan, which is called Places 2040. So it's about 20 years out.
Okay. About 20.
We have participated in 2 regional comprehensive plans. They were adopted a number of years ago, but they have been reviewed every 5 years. So at some point there'll be a need to update or do a new comprehensive plan, but that's not part of the working plan right now.
Okay, so for the discussion and for trying to figure out what each fire company's long-term plan would be interesting for this committee to understand. I think then what those impacts are going to be to each of the individual fire companies.
I think if we move to the next slide, maybe even 2. Yeah, let's go to the next one. So this is the same map that's on the wall. Just taken off the township's website, but all the green is pretty much ag area. Some of the question I have is where the fire companies are currently located. We're all about, I'm going to call it the midline. If you look at ISO standards, it says a fire station has to be within 5 miles of a residence, and we're still there, even though that the fire stations are midline. When we look at Whitmer's area up at the upper northern end, I think we're about 3.8 miles to get there. So we're still following ISO guidelines. We look at some of the streets in the northern end, they dead end. They dead end into an ag zone. When we talk about Alpha Drive, I think it's Norlam, some of the other developments up there. We know that Devon Creek's getting ready for an expansion. And I guess I'm just wondering if some of these streets that are up there in the northern end, they just go out to a farmer's field and they stop. Is there plans to continue those out to Willow Road eventually?
Well, I think the farms that you're talking about are zoned for development. So
Okay.
when development occurs, I would expect that, yes, they would be connecting to those roads and they would be extended somewhere.
Dave, are you talking in this general area right in here? Because
Yes.
this is all zoned R1 for residential. This darker green is all zoned R2 for a higher density residential called the medium density. It's this very light green here that is agricultural zone.
Okay. And the blue is the business part, right?
That's correct.
Business park.
The bluish purple.
Okay. So all the growth looks like it's going to occur from Whitmer West, I'll say. That's the plan, as the plan today. I did not look at the 2040 plan.
I don't think that's necessarily fair to say because there could be growth in the villages.
Okay.
Think about Fair Hill that just went in Any kind of redevelopment could happen as well, as has happened along Old Philadelphia Pike.
So the latest census in 2019 says that the East Lampeter Township has 19,000 people, which is less than half of what Manham Township or East Hempfield or Lancaster City has. We're going to add a new massive complex out at the end of Greenfield, 615 apartments, the average family size 3. Let's say there's another 2,000 residents. That takes us to 19,000 people. What are we looking at in the next 5 to 7 years, do you think, as far as population growth?
I didn't follow
I
your
guess.
math, to be honest, David. That didn't make sense to me, but I think our numbers for our 2020 census figures, 17,776.
For 2020.
Correct. And in 2010, it was 16,424. So we added about 1,300 population between 2010 and 2020.
I guess this is where the difficulty comes in, not knowing where we'll be at 2025 or 2027.
It's crystal ball stuff.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, well, that's pretty much, just having an open discussion about this, trying to understand where we're going.
But the question then becomes, based on what's happening, what equipment then is needed? Because if you're doing more high rises, that's, even if you don't do anything like out in the Bronx area with what we've been seeing in terms of farm fires and field fires and things of that nature. I mean, is that big different types of equipment?
Well, ISO determines what equipment you need.
So, well, it's your committee. I'm not.
I know we're crystal balling, yes.
Is it, I guess I need to ask, so are you saying this is a problem or an opportunity?
No, I'm just curious of where the township's going as far as growth goes, that's all.
Yeah, the economy will determine, who decides what they want to build and where they want to build it. So there's
Yeah,
a
from my
lot of
own
things
knowledge,
beyond us.
from my own knowledge, I wasn't aware how zoning laws really work. I thought that the ag zone was set by the county and that was it. That you couldn't change it, but now I'm hearing that there is a process to go through and attempt to change it. So that was a learning for me.
What was the number that you said changed from 2010 to 20 to the population?
16,424 to 17,776,
1,100 or something like that.
13.
But you had a big complex that was put in there on Greenfield Road. I mean, and then the other thing that take into account transient, like a lot of hotels and where you're gonna have people there, but not, you don't know how many and when, but you could have the fire protection needs. I mean, this is population, but your population can spike based on what's going on in the county and the community at a given time.
Yeah, population,
And
the
in fact,
census population is very different from, what number of people happen to be in our boundaries at any given time.
In fact, scenario planning, you should say, when you have hotels completely filled, the likelihood of having an emergency is greater.
I estimate that the township grows in population on a tourist day, a heavy tourist day, that we grow to about 35,000 people. That's my estimate.
Is that a good number?
I think he's
That's
a
right.
little low.
That's low.
I think he's a little low.
The next slide then was, we can go to a next slide after that. We pretty much talked to this one already. So the next couple of years, and I think we all want the same thing. We talked about bottom up versus top down, and I think we're all on the same page. What we want is the best least cost fire protection for East Lampeter Township, not only for the fire companies, but for the citizens and the community. And we just got to be good stewards of that. So when we look at what we have coming on deck here as far as apparatus funding or expenditures, bird in hand, engine, well, it should be 2024 now. I just heard this evening. Bird in hand gets a squad, I think, in 2026, if that's correct, or around that time frame. Whitmer's tanker is on board for 2025, but 2024, but I think that might be coming a little sooner due to the repairs that it needs. And then Lafayette's ladder truck is 2026, 2027 timeframe, and Ronce's engines in 2028. So if we could go to the next slide. The issue is double fold. It's not any as apparatus increases. It puts a lot more demand on the volunteers, the fire companies to afford equipment because, of course, as everything else, the costs go up in apparatus. And not only from a volunteer standpoint, but it puts more of a burden on the township also. We try and plan the best we can. I know we have numbers in the apparatus replacement plan. Those numbers are pretty fluid. They change every year practically. We take another guess at what they should be. But when we look at the options, what could we do? We talked about this at the chief's meeting as far as potential savings to reduce the financial burden on the fire companies and also the township. I know when Lafayette goes to buy their ladder truck, we're talking that at the 60-40 current split, 40% of a new ladder truck is probably going to be about $800,000 to Lafayette. So I'm not saying that we can't come up with $800,000 because our building will be paid off and we won't have any other debt for the next 20 years. So 800,000 is not insurmountable. But, you know, we got to look at, is there a better way? You know, is there a better way of doing things and vet that out? So when we first talked about apparatus funding at 100%, we had the Chicken Little syndrome where the sky is falling and everybody got pretty excited about 100% apparatus funding and how we're going to do that. And we can't ask for more money. And I'm not talking about that. It was also brought up about what's the value of apparatus refurbishment. You know, does it make sense if we have a piece of apparatus that's not fully, it's not heavily used? Does it make sense to refurbish it? And then what does the group think about purchasing used apparatus? I know Lafayette bought a used fire engine in 2009. Sorry, not 2011, 2009. That served us very well. I mean, we were happy with that, and we're still running that today. So if we go to the next slide. Now I've been through it. This is my thought. What would the ESC and East Lampeter Township, would they support modifying the apparatus plan to include refurbishment or the purchase of used apparatus with East Lampeter Township portion being 100% funded? So I'm going to try and explain that. So when we talk about purchasing used apparatus, let's say a new fire truck costs $1 million and the township's portion is $600,000. I'm just going to use easy numbers here. If we were to refurbish or purchase a used piece of apparatus for $400,000, you know, would the township be willing to? They would save $200,000 basically, and it would be zero cost to the fire companies, but the township would also have a savings of not having to lay out as much of an expenditure. So then we get into the value of refurbishment or the value of buying a used piece of apparatus. I mean, are we going to buy a used piece of apparatus that has a lot of problems, or are we going to refurbish one? And there's refurbishment models where you get the minimum refurbishment, which is just putting new lights and new paint on it, to the extreme, which is stripping it down, rebuilding the engine, putting a new transmission in, all that, and it costs almost as much as a new. So, you know, when we talk about a value-added package like that, you know, what's right? The next thing on here was to look at how we structurally do things with the funding of the fire companies. So when we look at the financial allotment towards fire, I tried to pull this out of the township budget, Hutch, but you know, currently we're getting about $58,000 divvied up between the 4 fire companies on a operational cost, and the township also is providing 60% of the cost of the apparatus. In addition, they provide us with workman's compensation, which goes up all the time, more expenditure. Apparatus insurance, that goes up also. Spill control is pretty minimal for spill control supplies, but it's still there. And then we have fuel, funding for fuel, and as we know, fuel costs have gone up. So the township, I'm happy to say, you know, they support us well with the current plan. But the question is can we do something differently? And
Dave, just before you go on there, just the township's actually giving us more than the 58,000. Am I correct in that? I'm thinking it's,
Yeah, and that's for each. That's not
Yeah.
in total.
yes, for each of the 4 fire companies is
Just
58,000,
wanna make
about
sure.
58.
sure, we're talking about the same figure here, but I
It's-
think it's more like
It's more.
665 or 62. I forget what it is.
Is it up to 62?
It's over 60. I know that.
Yeah, and we do that spring financial display, you know, everybody submits their financials and township puts their information. It's all on that
Yes.
annual display as well.
Yes. So
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're talking about the
it's
same
about
figure there.
60,000. We can put it at that. So I took a look at it. Some of you have the spreadsheet, some of you don't. I plugged in all the numbers for all the apparatus replacement over the next, until the year 2041, actually. Hypothetical numbers, and took all the current allotment that the township gives to each of the 4 fire companies, $60,000 per fire company, plus the apparatus that is set aside for the apparatus costs every year. And if it just took all that and I put it into we put it into a fire fund, that fund actually shows on the spreadsheet that we can have apparatus paid at 100%. And you know what? That fund actually grows till we get out to the year 2040, over $2 million in that account. That's saying the cost would stay the same. So I guess my question is, today, when each fire company gets the $60,000, and I know I'm going to step on some toes here, is that I don't feel that we have accountability of that $60,000. We don't have a tangible asset to show for that. I get the feeling that at least 2 of the fire companies just stick that in their savings account, and the other 2 probably spend it. So in the end, when we turn in our financial reports every April, it's transparent. We see that as income coming into the financial report, but we don't know what happens to it. So with a piece of fire apparatus, we actually have a tangible asset that we can show that this is where the town funding for that piece of apparatus went, and here it is, right here it is. So that's where I was going to with the 100% fire apparatus funding, was that if we just take all the funding that the township offers us and put it into apparatus, we could have our apparatus paid for at 100%. Lafayette would never have to worry about an $800,000 ladder truck loan, and Burdenham would never have to worry about any loan or RUNCs. All the apparatus would be paid for. So this is just my idea, my brainstorm, and I got to get it out there to everyone to see what they think of it. You know, is there a way that we should be doing things differently? So what we have on the table is refurbishment, buying used, or doing things structurally different with apparatus funding. Now, if that apparatus fund is growing, okay, and what's to say in the year 20, past my time, what's to say in the year 2032 or 2028, we need to buy new radios again. Guess what? There's going to be funds here to buy radios. What if we need something else? What if we need a new fire station in the northern end? What if we need a second ladder truck? I don't know where growth is going to go in the township. But by having all the funds put into an apparatus account or a fire services account, I feel that we have accountability for that money. What would happen is fire companies, when it's time to buy a piece of apparatus, or when the 4 fire companies say we need to buy new radios, you would come to the Emergency Services Committee and you would ask for a requisition out of those funds. That requisition would go to the Township Board of Supervisors, who would approve or deny it after the Emergency Services Committee would approve or deny it. That's just my idea. You can throw darts at it if you want, but I just see that maybe this is a better way for us to have accountability for the funds that the township is providing us.
If I could make a comment there, Dave. I guess I'm not quite sure where you're going with the accountability part. I feel like all four of the fire companies are very accountable with the $60,000 they're getting. We all submit the same financial documents and it shows very clearly where the money went. We all have expenses and they're all well over $60,000. So I guess I take a little bit of offense to that if the idea that somehow any of the four companies are not somehow sharing or being held accountable for the money. So that's one point. In terms of the apparatus refurbishment, I'd certainly be open to talking about whether that would make sense or not. Whether if I'm understanding you correctly, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. Let's say a new apparatus would be potentially $1 million purchase. If you were to buy or refurb something, and out of that $1 million purchase, you would now get 60,000 or 600,000. You're suggesting that the possibility of maybe buying either refurbishing or buying used, if you were to spend the same 600,000, would that be acceptable? Am I understanding that correctly? Is what you're asking?
That is the way I understood it. Yes,
Okay.
from our discussion at the
Okay.
chiefs meeting, that, you know, to
Okay.
take the burden off the fire companies, and there's a potential savings to the township also.
That
by
makes,
refurbing
yeah, that makes sense. And I
apparatus.
certainly think that would be worth discussion. So that, I guess but I guess where I'm really kind of confused is if we took all these funds and put them in one fund and then paid 100% of the apparatus, basically we would be taking the 60,000 that each company is now currently getting, and they would no longer be getting those funds unless they came to this committee and or the township supervisors and requested it for specific items. To me, that seemed like a big step going backwards. Like there would be no net new funding. It would just simply become more politicized, if you will. Who gets to use what funding for when? And the only way one company would get any more than another, or the only way it would benefit any of us is if it would come out of basically the pockets of another company right now. I mean, am I missing something here? Or to me, that sounds like a recipe for some really controversial discussions around this table that I'm not really sure that we're prepared for. But anyway, those are just my couple of thoughts on it.
My thinking would be that it would have to stay locked up in an apparatus type fund until at least the year 2032. So things change between now and then, but with all the apparatus that we have on deck coming up in the next 5 to 7 years, there wouldn't be any additional in there. So all the funding would have to go to apparatus.
When this is implemented, each company would take a $60,000 pay cut or funding cut.
Yes,
Okay. Just want to make sure I understand that.
yes, because all the funds would go into the apparatus account in order to support the apparatus.
Okay, that's a point in part of
Yes.
our discussions that
Yes.
that we need to
Something to think about.
think about and address, and I'm sure that we'll have some other solutions that people have as well that we need to consider. So if you could
Finally, the last part
move on, please. Yeah.
is the staffing. So I think this was all stated before in the chiefs meeting. And we've talked about this in prior years too, that the social dynamics of the volunteers, and you get back to the butcher baker, and we can argue this, you know, who's available and who's not. You know, not only staffing for emergencies is an issue, but what happens when the fire company treasurer, financial secretary, somebody that retires. So and staffing is an issue. So, you know, rather than trying to attack this as single fire entities, we need to maintain the volunteer system. I think we all want to maintain the volunteer system. I'm proposing that we develop a team consistent of each of the 4 fire companies. I know that Bird Hand and Lafayette had some meeting here a few weeks ago on just how the dynamics, the social dynamics of Bird Hand operate. But yeah, I think that some of that could have been shared with all 4 fire companies. And you know, what I want to call it is active recruiting. You know, are we pulling out all the stops when we talk about the volunteers? You know, when we try and get recruiting and retention, are we going out to the churches? Are we visiting the schools? No, we're not. And are we reaching the right people our business leaders. I mean, I've seen that in the straw man pool. You know, are we just need to pull out all the stops, you know? Do we need to have some type of combination fire protection? You know, do we need to change our box alarms and operate differently? You know, Whitmer and Lafayette are working more closely together than we ever did before as far as trying to mitigate the risk on some of the higher call volumes, you know, the stuff that's going to be more risky, class 1 vehicle accidents and vehicle fires, that kind of thing. So do we need to look at like a combination fire protection? You know, does Bird and Hand and Runks need to work more closely together, or Bird and Hand and Whitmer need to work more closely together? You know, anywhere where there's a struggle with East Lampeter Township Fire getting out in the daytime. Then lastly on here is, you know, what are the burdens for volunteers? You know, what burdens? I mean, I can show you a long spreadsheet of all the community public relations that Lafayette does. And, you know, sometimes John Bowers was right. Sometimes the people would just like to throw money at you and say, yeah, I don't have time to volunteer. Here's my money. And there's other times where you go to these businesses and we can't provide a donation, but here I can give you a couple cases of pretzels, you know, and that doesn't help. You know, I don't need cases of pretzels. I mean, it's nice to have, but you know, I need a donation, you know, for our service, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of places that just don't want to really provide that type. So anyway, the East Lampeter Township volunteers, I mean, we currently save the community about $4 billion every year. And then I lastly here, I jotted down some of the challenges of the Emergency Services Committee that we need to tackle. And everybody has this PowerPoint, so I'm not going to read a bullet point for bullet point, but you know, even as recently as Lemsa made the presentation here, you know, if you guys aren't aware, Lemsa is really struggling. I mean, today they had to pull an ambulance from Reinholds to go to Lititz for a class 1 call. And they had to pull, who was it? In Warwick, Rothsville ambulance went to Manor Street in Lancaster City, and they asked for a second due ambulance, and that came from Ackland. And the EMS is really struggling. Lemsa is really struggling as far as having enough people. And I know that they met with the Conestoga Township Board of Supervisors. They recently met with the East Lampeter supervisor. Conestoga isn't going to provide them anything. And, you know, Bob May was pretty much, we're going to go out of business. And, you know, it is a stress. It's a strain, you know. So I don't know where emergency services is all going right now, but, you know, fire ends second after EMS goes down, fire's next. As far as responses, you know, they'll be calling on us to respond rather than EMS. So anyway, we have a lot in front of us here, and I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions. These were some of the things that I threw out, and you know, trying to pull it all together.
Well, we certainly can't solve everything that is facing us all at one time. We need to take it in chunks. And we need to decide what the most critical issue or are. I will develop a program that may not suit all 4 fire companies, but pieces can be extracted and used, modified to suit the individual fire companies. And I personally think that our customer is the guy that we're depending on anyway. We depend on the person that's going to support running on a truck or engine or any emergency response, as well as the money. So engagement with the community, I think, has to happen in a way that the community leaders, community business leaders, understand what our individual needs are. And putting together some sort of formal type of program to let them understand what you really are. probably something we might want to consider. But some of the other equipment.
I think overall, most of us are reaching out to the community and trying to get the support. We're all struggling a little bit with personnel, I mean, and certain other issues. One thing that I'm kind of trying to figure out a little bit from a past previous meeting, it was mentioned, that we need to run less calls. I'm trying to figure out how we're to run less calls. And then with what you're saying, with us reaching out to the community and try to express their, what our needs are and stuff like that. That's kind of, don't seem to go hand in hand when we're trying to tell them, oh, we need staffing. We're going to have to run less calls, but we're getting people, even from the emergency service, that say about running the less calls, but then they call us to come pump out basements and sit here and talk about, using all this equipment that. You're calling us, we're here to provide a service. So I'm just struggling and trying to figure that out on how we're supposed to do it. I mean, what calls are we supposed to eliminate? I mean, from the township end, we have to provide a fire service. So when we're called, we just sit here and say, okay, call the chief will determine if we're going out or not. I'm confused. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but get some guidance on that.
I don't think that it's necessary to run less calls.
That was
My
the comment that was
point is-
made. We need to run
Yeah,
less calls.
My point is that if your community leaders, your business leaders that you're supporting and you're depending on don't understand thoroughly what your needs are and how do you project those needs to them? I think that's what we need to struggle with, how to develop a program that shows them what we're all about and what we think we are about, but also we need to listen to them and say, what do you want from us? What can you do to support us? What are you willing to do to support us? And not leave anyone out. I know that that's pretty hard to say because you got people that are in Florida that are the decision makers for some of the places, but there are others that I think you can get enough in one room, over a period of a couple of meetings that you get a good feel for what the community leaders and the community business leaders are thinking about what we really offer them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, there's been times we've done the calls, all four of us been together on calls, especially on our calls, and you get some of the property owners or business owners, they're like, well, wow, all this just for that. Well, yeah, you kind of go into it and explain, yeah, we're struggling with manpower, we all work together, come in for that. What can we
But do they
about
really
it?
understand your
Well, that's what
operational?
I'm saying. That's
they
where they're
understand your
coming to. is What can we do to help?
Yeah.
Hey, if you have personnel that you can volunteer during the day, that's willing, but
Well,
they won't let them go. The days of people letting employees go run bar calls is pretty much gone. There's very few
Yeah.
that still do it, but majority don't.
And I hate to put a wet blanket on, but it's going to get worse. I'm 64 years of age. I'm a baby boomer. There's 80 million baby boomers in the population. Our backups, people that are replacing us, there's 46 million. And you look at school districts and their bus drivers and all those support services are scrambling for their piece of 46 million. So the number of volunteers, number of people out there that can volunteer is going to be half of what it is right now. It's going to get worse. But you're right.
And I try to offend anybody here, but some of this newer generation, they don't want to do that. They expect, if they do it, they expect to come in, oh yeah, okay, I want to move up here. Same as going into a business. You know, the hard workers and working your way up the ladder, those days are gone too. That's pretty much what I have.
Yeah, I guess the main suggestion I would have is that it feels like sometimes with these conversations, we're kind of going around in circles. I guess my suggestion would be that we start by defining more specifically the problem we're trying to solve. And we went over a pretty big list of things, suggestions, ideas, whatnot, but it's hard for me to have any, a lot of constructive input. Like, are we trying to solve a specific financial problem? Is it an HR problem? If so, is it more of an administrative staff problem? Is it a firefighter problem? Engineers versus firefighters? And then I think even that's going to vary from one department to the next. So it kind of feels hard to get a good solution or to come up with, we can come up with a lot of different ideas, but unless we're really focused on all on the same page in terms of defining the specific problem we're trying to solve, I'm not sure how productive it's going to be for us to talk about, again, solutions ahead of that. So I guess that's kind of that would be my main point going, talking about the conversation we've had tonight and the last couple is, I'm with you guys. I agree that there's a lot of challenges. There's no doubt about it, but I think they are different for each company. And I think it would be very helpful if we could, again, prioritize and pin down and specifically define on paper, this is the number one problem we're trying to solve. And then we could talk about maybe what are all four companies could come back with some solutions, multiple potential solutions for those problems. Again, it's hard to do that without knowing, again, if this was a problem, let's just, for example, if this is a problem of each fire company really needs an additional $50,000 a year. Okay, like to me, I can get my mind around that. Now there's going to be different ways of doing that, but that to me, that's a specific, we can talk about whether that should come from township taxpayers, whether it should come from donations, whether it should come from fundraisers, whether it should somehow come from grants. But it's something tangible that we can say, you know what, and there's a kind of a start and end too with it. Again, that would just as an example for the financial part of it, but I think we could do some of the same things in human resources. So anyway, that's my suggestion. I'm not sure how we go forward here this evening, but my suggestion is whatever we do, maybe all work it, trying to solve one at a time. And if we can solve one problem, then we can go to the next and the next after that. But
Well, that's kind of what I had in mind with the straw man. We start with one item and we work our way through. And maybe what we do is we say, okay, said, what we think is the most significant issue. And then maybe we have each fire company say, this is how I have, what my plan is. This is the plan that I'm struggling with. I need help in improving that. Or if I've had success in that area, maybe share that success and the program and the plan that you put together so that others can look at it and say, okay, maybe I can use that, or maybe I can modify it, or maybe it won't work. I don't think we sit around and talk about this. We're not ashamed to share what our problems are. Maybe we ought to share some of our solutions that we've worked with that are successful. And that's what we're all about. That's what we're here for. Okay. Dave? I'm sorry, Steve.
When I had my meeting with John Blowers last week, I always last one up. And we had a good conversation. I took our president along, and we talked everything from the apparatus to the financial support we get from the township, to the financial support we get from our town folk. What I think affects all of us is the regions that we're in this township. kind of like what Dave had down here, is that we're down in a totally less populated area. And it's tougher getting the people involved like they used to. Our thing was that the people that do support us had supported us for years and years and years. They've gotten older now. They still live there, but they can't do it anymore. We don't have apartment complexes going in. There's not a development down in the Runks area whatsoever. You know, that you have 20 or 30 houses together. So the challenges for us are going to be a lot different as far as where to get people when you don't have the people to start with. And believe me, when we have businesses move in our area, we are there and talk to them. But a lot of the business that we have are out of the state, across the country. And I wish we had more locally owned businesses, but we don't. And you can sit there and talk and talk and talk, and they look at you and it's like, you know, yeah, I hear you, but my hands are tied because we're talking to somebody out in Wisconsin or Minnesota, and it's like, good luck. Funding with that goes hand in hand with it, because we send the letters out to local, we try to send it out to the corporates. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think they really care where Runks is in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So it's a challenge that way. The thing I said to John, and again, I don't want to trample on toes, but the monies that we get from East Lampeter Township, and I call them the quarterly allowance. That sounds terrible, but I think, you know, it's a quarterly allowance. And I guess when I brought my kids up is, don't spend it all. You got to save some and spend it wisely. And the big thing, and I guess I'm a lot of Lancaster County here, but our thing we always did down in Runks is want versus need. And, you know, it'd be great to have a lot of different things, but we don't work it that way because we never had the big business and stuff like that. I will say the businesses that we have that are the locals support us well. And, you know, I wish we could get people, but those businesses have a rough time getting people. And, you know, to have the little town business is the way to get people. You can maybe pull 4 or 5 people out of a small business that, because they've been here all their lives. And the owners are part of the fire company and things like that. You know, I don't want to sit here and say it's not about the money. It's about the people and trying to get them to understand you. But if you know, they don't have the people that want to volunteer that are a part of that business. I mean, the businesses are having a rough time just having an incentive to keep people because they move from jobs to jobs and stuff like that. So, you know, I always looked at, you know, if I could get 7 or 8 years out of a lot of these people that are in the fire company, that's a bonus. Because right now, I think you're probably down to about maybe 3 to 4 years and they move on to something else. And I'm not saying we got to go out there and give an attaboy every time you turn around, or, you know, I'll give you $1 for every time you come to a call or something like that. That's not it. It's just, I dealt with it I worked at a place 45 years and I did a lot of the hiring and firing, and I hired a lot more than I fired, thank goodness. But it's tough to keep the people and get the people. especially when, yeah, oh, by the way, we go out in the middle of the night and, oh, by the way, we do this too, and we do that, and they look at you, and then, you talk to them about the training you want them to take the first year, the second year, and the third year. It's a little overwhelming for people. And it's just totally different. But the biggest thing we see is we are down in the less populated area. There's less to pick from. And we go to the schools. I know they talk about it at the churches. I've heard about it. And sometimes they don't necessarily like that, but you got to start somewhere. But we are trying to get more people involved with every committee. If you're a member of our fire company, you are on a committee or two committees for total involvement, but to get them to understand how the fire company functions, how it works, and try to get people educated. I hate to say, I don't want to say train. You train monkeys, you educate people. And you educate them on what it takes to run the business and keep it going. So, this list, again, that we came up with a couple months ago was, I said some things, everyone said some things that, and they don't always pertain to all of us. And what's important to me is not the number one priority, maybe for somebody else. So I'm not going to sit here and say, this is what we have to do, but I'll gladly tell people what we do. I mean, no problem whatsoever. All we can do is listen with it. But I really believe, though, we have to be true to ourselves and not live on big dollar items and be more realistic with a lot of stuff we do. It doesn't get you in a financial position sometimes. Because our biggest committee we have at our fire company right now is our finance committee. And we had a meeting last night and we're looking at adding possibly 2 to 3 more people for the educating down the road, but also to get more input on what we can do. So again, it's our areas are different, our businesses are different. They're still businesses, and I don't disagree, but it's not the guy I can go out anymore and talk to, because that manager maybe was 3 managers ago, and now I have to start over again with somebody. So
maybe that's what it takes.
well, I can tell you when you go to a place and we go to Rockville, we used to go to a call there probably 1.5 times a week. Dave has hanger with the calls, and there's no people to get from there. The people change and you can't go talk to them. And, now we have nothing there. And hopefully, they have some plans, but I don't know if they'll come through or not. And it's something that the township's talked about for a long time. But as far as working with us, they're great. They call all the time. If they change Knox box keys, they want this and that. We're there and they talk to us, but they can't keep up with the number of people that they have in and out and the businesses that they, so, we're kind of down there. I'm going to call it, we're agricultural down where we're at. We're out, but I can tell you, we had a brush fire the other night, and we had 2 pieces out and manned, and we were getting help coming across the fields. So people, they will help, and they know we need the help. It's just, it's the total commitment, I think, is the tough part. So,
Jason Byler, alternate Lafayette. Echo a lot of Steve's points. You know, we have a ton of business in our area, and that's often looked at. Unfortunately, 70% of that is franchisees or something in that realm where the owners aren't local. They don't care. They just won't. We can talk to them a million and one times. We have, you know, I've been a huge supporter of us, continues to be a huge supporter of us. And obviously a lot of property within the township. And so that's greatly appreciated. But kind of coming full circle here, we can go around the circle all we want tonight. But getting back to Jim's point of, you know, what does the customer expect? We had an incident a couple weeks ago, Hickory Lane. A couple minutes later, that would have been a fatality. First piece in, we have a 70-plus-year-old chauffeur and one other guy on the rig. That's not acceptable in my mind. For your first piece in, not only could we have had a fatality there, we'd have been having very different conversations. But I think second to that, we have to look at, we're putting now one firefighter in that building by himself to make that rescue if that would have been needed. And now we're putting one of our own guys. And I don't want to have the next time I come up here and stand here, we're talking about this and where we've had a major fatality. So we talk about problems, I think coming back to what Steve's saying, you know, manpower and what we can do is significant right now. And I think we can throw all the money at the rigs we want. We can talk about all the apparatus we want. But if we have nobody to sit there but in a seat, it ain't gonna matter. And we're gonna be having that conversation. We now had a major fatality. So I don't know where we go with that. It's a very broad issue. But when I sit there, what keeps me up at night about this township and my department, it's that. We have put things in place. We're working on recruitment and retention programs. We've instituted where we have 2 live-in firefighters. We have a multitude of things we're using as stopgap measures, okay? But not one of those is a final solution. And I'm not saying we're gonna find the magic bullet. We can talk to the business leaders all we want. Just as, you know, and we have. You know, we've had 27 different public relations events and 10 fundraisers this year to date. So, you know, I guess I'm a little offended when I sit here and say, well, you're not active in the community. So, you know, I think we are. I think we're trying to outreach here, but some of it looks like Steve shared is, you know, finding these contacts. And these contacts sometimes are revolving doors. So I think we need to look at some of that. You know, I think I'd like to see some actionable items from this committee instead of just continuing to go around the table. Something that we can act upon, kind of as Paul alluded to. Let's pick an issue or 2 or 3 and tackle it. Because I don't want to be standing up here at some point when we're talking about having that major fatal incident. And we could have made a difference because we don't have the staff to put on the rig. That's all.
Thank you. Nothing to say? Dave? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, so we need to decide what our action items are. First of all, let me ask, is any of the information that I put in this format something that is the most critical to each of you individually? And where should that be in the priority list of action items for this committee to start working? I think I've heard 2. But I want members of the committee to.
I think some of the things that I've thrown out, the team, I'm going to call it, the committee needs to think about. Among my biggest problem at Lafayette is daytime staffing. Daytime staffing is what I would like to focus on.
Okay, that's, let's call that HR, right?
Sure.
Okay. Whitmer? Okay. All right. Okay. People, same. Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I would say of the two between financial and HR would probably be HR. I do
Okay.
feel like we're in a pretty good shape, but yeah, we'd definitely be interested in talking about, how can we do it better? Absolutely.
I forgot Donnie's up here. I'm sorry, Donnie. Donnie, did you have any input? Don Boyer.
No, I'm good at this point.
You're good at this point. Okay. Okay. So it sounds to me that HR is the critical thing now. So what are you currently doing to the fire companies? What's working, what's not working? I know that there are some things that are working and some things that are not. Maybe what we should do is each fire company come back with a list of working programs in the HR and a list of items that they're struggling with. And we look at those and we see if we can't connect some dots and start beginning to develop some sort of program that's going to be a help from a committee standpoint. Maybe we'll put together some subcommittees from within based on what the outcome of those inputs are.
I guess one of the questions I have is there anybody that knows of volunteer fire companies anywhere that doesn't have a job out there? They do it differently. Is there a firemen's association or something that has connections somewhere that can say community like us, just asking the question. Who are the exemplars that are out there?
There's a website called the National Volunteer Fire Council. It's a pretty big organization, and they share best practices all the time. And pretty much at Lafayette anyway, we try to take those and apply those. It's no different than what we're already doing. It gets back to getting the people who want to contribute. I know Steve's community for Bronx is limited in the amount of people in the community. For Lafayette, more renters and people who would rather give you a check than volunteer their time. I still think we need to get out there though and to schools and churches and so that they know our current situation.
Okay. If there are no objections to my suggestion that we, at the next meeting, have each fire company present their HR program. I would suggest maybe you want to do a bulletized listing of things that are working, things that aren't working, what the projection plan is, those sorts of things. And then we can look at that as a committee and say, all right, how can we connect some dots? Maybe there's something that's going on in Birmingham that could be helpful to somebody. Something's going on in Lafayette, and so forth. Okay. Any objections to that approach? Okay, if not, I would solicit the input for the next meeting. Our priority will be HR for a period of time. See if we can't come up with some solutions. All right. So at this time, then we'll conclude the discussion. Pick it up at the next fire meeting. Are there any public comments at this time?
Just relating to what you just were saying about the request for information for the next meeting. I think it'd be helpful if each of the fire companies would put down, to start with their call load for the year. And then specifically, just like Dave, if and each one of them put down what they really need. It's a minimum, at least a starting point. Does Dave need, more rates and more calls? Do you need 3 people more? Do you need 5? Do you need 10? And the same each of the companies. I think if you include some of that information, the breakdown, at least you have something more tangible again that you guys can try to chase down and get the information back and forth, what's working, what's not. You know what I mean? Because without knowing, again, we just start the conversation goes around, but you don't get that. Those absolute, okay, here.
Okay.
I mean, you tend to do that with money because it's easier to do with money. You can do it with this.
Anyone else? Okay. All right. Very quiet this evening.
Yeah. John and I had a conversation, and I know he's been very involved he met with all your chiefs, as I understand. And so I don't have a lot to add at this point. I understand the issue to be staffing as much as anything. Bob May was mentioned here tonight. He presented to us, and his issue is staffing as well, hiring and retaining. So I understand the thing. Board would be, eager for what you would ask of us.
Okay. All right. Very good. Melanie, we haven't heard from you this evening.
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have any input for the group, for the committee?
No, I think I'm just taking it all in. I mean, my thought is, I understand why it's so hard to get volunteers when it's even harder to get people to work. They don't want to work for money, so why would they spend their time volunteering? I don't know where everyone has went. Maybe once everything shakes out from COVID and the change in the country, we'll see where things are going, but HR is the #1 issue of every organization in the country right now. And that's about all I can say.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. Maybe I'll think a little bit about this, and I might call a couple of fellows, a couple of chiefs, a couple of fire companies, and I might decide to put together a kind of a list. Send it out for you to consider as a format for the presentation, so that everyone kind of presents the same types of information. That way we can better structure our discussions at the next meeting. Is that all right? If I do that, I'll think about it, eating turkey on Thursday. So, Eric, do you have anything to add? Okay. All right. Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Yes.
One thing I think we need to define here, especially if we have Eric, we have Melanie, is, what level of service do our citizens expect to be delivered when they call us? Break that up because I think there's a disparity. Just township in general. So let's not leave that picture and that stone unturned.
Well, if I can just react to that statement. I mean, I can find a lot of people to pump out my basement if I have water in it. And I can find a a lot of ways to, pay or fundraise or whatever, but I'm not very good at fighting fires or doing EMT, I can stop bleeding and I can do those things, but I'm not very good at, transporting somebody with a broken leg. So I think that, those things that the experts do in this room are the things that's what we expect. That's what citizens expect. They ask for too much more, but they expect you to fundraise. They expect you to do the water pump out, to, do all those other things. But really what you do best is what you should be doing.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year, and a safe one. We will see you in